Welcome back, listening audience. It's been a while since I've been in this chair. Mike's been doing his thing, and I've been on assignment. Today we have Seth Hendricks with us. We met Seth down in Las Vegas, although he's not in Las Vegas. He's up in St. Paul, Minnesota. And we were in Vegas for the Frontline Strong. What do we call that? A symposium? A conference? Probably a symposium is
I like
good, huh?
Symposium. It sounds better.
Yeah, symposium. 50-cent word.
Yeah.
Our friend Andy put that on. We're going to have Andy on a podcast at some point too, but he's going to make an annual thing about it. It's basically like training for frontline responders. We call them, first responders, whatever. But it also includes people like dispatchers and corrections officers, and not just the cops and EMS folks and fire. So anyway, Seth is down there. He's in financial planning now, but he was formerly in law enforcement and has a degree in criminal justice and has a colorful story to tell us. Something about having a wake up call, but I'm gonna pause there because I don't like introducing people. I like them to introduce themselves. So, Seth, welcome. Good midday to you. Good morning to everybody on the West Coast.
Yeah. Thanks. It's been fun, Jake. As you mentioned, I got to meet you guys back in August. I think it was out in Vegas. Andy's a friend of mine, the guy who put that on, and so I went out there as an attendee. But I've been out of law enforcement for a decade at this point. Really wasn't sure what I was going to fully get out of it, but got a lot. A lot is an understatement. Life changing is, probably gets thrown around a lot, maybe too much. But probably talk to my wife, and I think she would agree, though, that coming back from that and the changes that I've made based on the conversations we had out there and what I learned from you guys and the other speakers was very impactful. But yeah, as far as like my quick background, yeah, in high school, I knew that law enforcement or military was, one of the two routes that I was going to take. My dad quickly put a kibosh on military based on his military background, so I guess it was chosen for me to be a cop. College criminal justice degree, knew exactly what I was doing, what I wanted to do. My life was pretty much written. 30 years, retired at 50, 55, right off into the sunset. A few years in, realized that wasn't exactly what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. I said the rest of our lives. My then girlfriend, fiance, now wife, just wasn't made out. For what we wanted our life to be. Like, that was not going to be the route for us to be happy and successful as a couple. And fast forward 15 years from when I started to be a police officer, here we are today. And yeah, I'm a financial advisor today. It's drastically different world showing up to the office or working from home compared to where I was before. Easy to say that I made the right decision. And had I had that mental health symposium at the start of my career, I might not have left the career, good or bad. So
It's really interesting. We keep talking about this symposium. I don't know where Mike went. He just went screen dark. So I don't know.
I'm
Hopefully he
still
returns.
here.
He's in the producer's chair because Kevin Barry is on assignment, and Mike, I don't think he understands how to push the right buttons. But we'll see if he comes back. Uh, we keep talking about this thing. It was called Frontline Strong, 2025, and Andy Arnold, who we mentioned before, coordinated it. He's also a former cop, and he's got a heart for helping folks. We will have him on to talk about it because it is something that needs advertising. But also there were some presenters there, one of whom was Kent Williams, and he talked about how there's this 5-year drop off, and you basically hit that point. But take us through the story here, because I want to ask a few more pointed questions about what your life trajectory is and how things have changed within you, because I think it's instructive to our audience to be able to maybe hold loosely to our careers, certainly not embrace them as identities, because if they become our identities, then we don't know, quote unquote, who we are at our core if we lose our career. And you've managed to do that, so you're much happier now, it seems. Go ahead and give us the backdrop and the story.
yeah, well, first off, I'll say if we're losing listeners like we're losing hosts, we're probably down to nobody listening other than you and me, Jake. So it looks like Mike's
Well, we
gone,
lost.
but
33% of our panel and 50% of the hosts is not a great retention.
yeah. But no, yeah. So as far as, the career path and whatnot, I found that extremely fascinating, Jake, what you mentioned there about Kent and his work. And he said, it's that 5-year mark. And when he said that, I mean, I'd never heard that before in law enforcement. I know there's the 3-year mark in law enforcement where it takes 3 years to really get comfortable, like feeling like you know what you're doing in the job. But I've never heard anything around the 5-year mark. So when he mentioned that, I'm like, holy shit, like that's right when we made that conscious decision to get out. But it was growing up being fairly athletic and somewhat successful in that walk of life, not crazy. I wasn't recruit or anything like that, but just good enough to feel good about myself. Having a little bit of ego, I always knew that I wanted to be active and I always wanted to help people, and having a servant's heart, that's just kind of who I was. And I got to be active and have that servant's heart in law enforcement, which is why I kind of chose that path, or the path kind of chose me, if you will. But also being a little bit of egotistical, I was kind of fixed in my mindset too. I went to school for criminal justice and I learned everything and I knew everything. So when I started, I was 22 years old, which is crazy when you think about a 22-year-old kid showing up to a 50-something-year-old person's house trying to solve their real life adult problems, when I've lived on my own for, I don't know, 6 minutes at that point in my life. But anyways, that's a whole nother thing. But anyways, so 22 years old and very fixed mindset. I'm graduated in college and then I went to the academy. It was hired before that. They paid for me to go through the academy, which is atypical. Graduated my academy towards the top of the class, so all things were great. And you just asked me, I knew everything. And then quickly my wife and I, probably a year, 3 years in, we started to actually step back, like, well, maybe what we believe to be true actually isn't true, in all walks of life. So we started to just do some, you know, self-exploration, education, uh, and it was probably at the first time, that was probably the first time in my life that I actually looked ahead, uh, to make some decisions about my life today. And what I quickly realized is there were not many happy, healthy, married to their first wife, 50-year-old cops. There just weren't too many of them. And I love my wife. And I loved her then and I love her now. And I don't want her to be my future ex-wife. I still don't want her to be my future ex-wife. So we just decided, like, hey, this is probably not the long-term path forward for us to be happy, together. And knowing my personality too, one thing that Kent Williams had brought up is in law enforcement, there's 1585, like 15% of people who get into law enforcement, unfazed, unfazable. They walk in, they're happy go lucky, glass is always half full. 5% vampires, right? Leeches, just no matter what happens, it's the end of the world, everything sucks. And then there's the 80 in the middle. And I was clearly in the middle of the 80 who can be influenced up or down. And it seemed like at that point in our department, there was more than 5% there at the bottom. It was at least 15, if not more than that.
Well, and sometimes their presence can overrepresent simply because of their presence, right? It's like the vampires seem more obvious because of their negativity. So it's possible that it was that low, but it just seemed bigger because they're louder and they make a stink. And
Oh,
yeah,
that's probably accurate. But yeah, so I mean, that was the turning point, that 4 to 5 year mark. And one thing I shared with you guys briefly, remember we talked about it. Honestly, I don't know that anybody outside of my wife, one of my best friends, and the head of our police union know that I got turned down for a second law enforcement job because of a failed mental health eval. So
yeah,
at
you
about
put that in your bio. I want to hear about this.
Yeah. So going back to like the ego side of it, it was pretty, I mean, it was mind boggling that I got the no. So it was like 3 to 4 years in, and we had these conversations, my wife and I, and it was like, well, maybe it's a change of scenery, right? Grass is always greener. So maybe it's not me, maybe it's the department. And by the way, I'm still great friends with a lot of people in the department. I'm not trashing my department, where I love a lot of people that I worked with, most of them, right? Uh, but it
Was
was
that there
certainly
in St. Paul?
no, that was in southern Wisconsin, Beloit, Wisconsin.
Okay.
So far south. Yeah. Uh, but so I went all the way through the process, passed with flying colors. Absolutely, this is the guy we want to hire. I'm like, cool, I'm excited. It's over by Milwaukee, Wisconsin, suburb of Milwaukee. And then I go for the psyche val. And at this point, I've been doing the cop thing for like 3-ish years. So as I mentioned earlier, that's when you feel good about the work you're doing. And going from the city I worked into the city I was applying to, a really step down, a big step down in my crime and problems. Like the city I worked in, we had a lot of shit. The city I was going to, not Mayberry, but I mean, it's by Milwaukee, but it's not Milwaukee. So I just felt really good about it. And going into like the psyche val, I don't know if I never asked. They just told me I failed the psyche val. Going into it, I just was really lackadaisical about it. Like I didn't take it serious. So I still chalk it up to the psychologist was just pissed because I didn't take his job serious and he failed me for that. But I don't know. It could have been something else. There literally could have been anything that came up in there on why I got turned away for that job.
All right. So let's go back a little bit. You've got, I could share some of this because I too was a 22-year-old hotshot wanting to
Mhm.
become a cop. And then later I was a 27-year-old hotshot who wanted to become a cop. One of those ended up in the academy and I didn't complete. The other ended up with me pulling the plug and not actually even applying or following through with it. But I can identify a little bit with that because when you're that young and I love that you mentioned the athletic thing, right? It's like I'm good enough to know that I'm not going to be elite at some sport, but I'm also good enough to know that I'm better than most average people. So I want to do something active, right? So you combine that little bit of ego and hubris and arrogance with some intellect, some academic prowess, and then you roll it all together into what would be a law enforcement career. And it's like, wow, I'm a stud now. Give me a uniform, right? So I'm curious about what shifted when you said you guys started looking around at some stuff about what maybe reality isn't what you thought it would be, or whatever it was, however you said that. What was that like? What bubbled to the surface? Because that often is, I think, overlooked by people. Like I want to, I'm bringing this to the front because with some intentionality, because in my work, oftentimes when we deal with, say, couples or families that have problems, the problems didn't manifest yesterday. They manifested years earlier and they ignored the warning signs. It sounds like you guys didn't just blow past those, though. You actually honestly endeavored to figure out what was shifting. And I'm curious what that was like for you and why you obeyed the nudge to examine as opposed to just plowing forward with your, chin to chest, ignoring the disturbance.
I think we wanted something more than what was in front of us. My wife, she has her own graphic design and marketing studio. She's extremely talented. And the work that she does today, she's always done since college. And it's always had a greater opportunity than the role of a police officer as far as what you can do with your life. And I'm not saying it's better work or worse work. It's more impactful or less impactful. It's just you have a greater opportunity. As a police officer, you're in the academy, you're an FNG, you're on probation, then that all passes within 6 to 18 months, 2 years, depending upon the department, right? And then you're off probation and you're still the FNG for a while. And then all of a sudden you're 5 year and then you're 10 year, maybe you're sergeant, but you're always in a box, like in corporate America, right? You're sergeant, last name, lieutenant, last name, officer, last name. The title's always going to stay the same. The last name's always going to change. And at that point in our life, we're like, well, I don't want my future to already be set for me, where I know that, hey, if I continue to do what I'm doing, then in 2 years, I'm going to be able to put in for this role. I wanted more. We wanted more. And we combined that with the idea, again, that there weren't happy, healthy 50-year-old cops. Like, that's just not what we saw as our best future.
Yeah, but how'd you figure that out? I mean, like, I've never heard anybody say that before like that. And I know lots of cops, like lots of them. Now, maybe they talk about it and they just go, that won't be me. But I got to believe it's more like a willful ignorance. Like I'm going to defy the statistical odds, right? But how did you actually have that conversation? That seems really vulnerable.
Yeah, I don't know. Because Jake, and especially if you know me today, I still have an ego about me. I try to temper it the best I can. but it still comes up. And I think a lot of it ties back to my upbringing, to older brothers, like my family, my younger half sister, always competitive, so on and so forth, right? Like a lot of it can be tied to that. But that point in my life, for whatever reason, I don't know, we were just surrounded by the right people. We really thought differently, and I was absolutely just laying down all of my ego and saying, I can't beat these statistics. Alcoholism and suicide and divorce is like, that's the bag that you carry as a cop, right? And I look at my family, knock on wood, suicide hasn't been prevalent, but man, divorce and alcoholism, sheesh. Like, I joke, like, if I want to get away from my family, I can go to Canada because they don't let people with DUIs up there, right? Like, and that's a joke, but at the same time, there's like alcoholism in my family has been an issue, and I've struggled with drinking too much in the past. So it was just one of those things that you couple my personality, in that middle 18, who could have easily been pulled down to the bottom five. My family having, an issue with alcohol. And then you put that in that cocktail of a cop. And I was like, there's no way I beat those odds. That was my belief. And my wife, uh, you know, so much credit to her. Um, she helped me get there without telling me that I need to make a change.
Mike, feel free to jump in here as you're finally stabilized, I guess.
Do you guys miss me?
We
We
did.
did.
We made
It was
jokes at your
not the
expense while you
same.
were gone.
Yeah,
I,
things are going all kinds of. It's not even the producer's chair that's getting me. It's my camera today that has decided to.
I notice you're at a lower angle now. It's
Yes, yeah,
I can see
it's
your
all
nostrils
coming in.
better, which is good.
Yeah. No, no, Seth. I think that's amazing that you had that self awareness, and obviously credit to your wife for pointing that out. I'm thinking about kind of how police officers are perceived, right? Like when we think about the military, like, everyone always thinks, okay, the military, the vets, those are the ones that, have the worst lives. They take their lives at an alarming rate disproportionately. But, being at the symposium or the conference, whatever it was, however we're talking about it, there was a moment where I wished every single person that has a bad feeling about police officers could sit through and listen to what we were listening to, because there's so much, I think, nuance in the conversation of why police officers struggle with mental health. There's so many factors, but I guess like what I want to ask you is the financial component, right? Because you went into, or you went from, I'm a police officer, this isn't going to end good for me, but almost like, what can I do to help police officers, right? Like, how much is the financial component, like, you think, weigh on a police officer's mind?
it's interesting. So I didn't go from cop to financial planner. There was a gap in there where it took me a while to find to where I am today. Um, and where I am today, though, Mike, whenever connect with police officers, it's very common. They think of things in terms of paychecks. I'm sorry, in terms of overtime. Um, and a lot of them live more for today than for the future. So finances maybe aren't directly on everybody's mind. It wasn't when I was there. I was still pretty young and I still felt good about it. I didn't have a family. We didn't have kids. We had a house, but we did fine. But I certainly could see it in some of the other officers, um, as far as some of the financial decisions they made or stress that they would have. But I just try to get ahead of it when I'm meeting with police officers today and let them know, like, hey, if you haven't already, you probably want to buy a truck, a lot of guns, a boat, and a cabin. And every time you think of that next purchase, you think, "Oh, the payment is only $400. So that's a shift of overtime a week or every other week, and I can afford it." So it definitely is there. But early on in the career, I don't think it's felt. It's usually, Jake, to your point of like things kind of build up over time. That's certainly one that snowball takes a little while to build. Maybe 4, 5, 6 years in, you're definitely feeling it if you're not being mindful of saving your money and you're still living that risque life that calls those people to that career. It's just more of a I don't know that I'll be here next week, so might as well buy a boat today.
Yeah, that's interesting. That phrase, right? Because I wonder how many people actually think about. It's hard to think about your own death for too long. It's just not a comfortable feeling. But like, how many people say, "Okay, like I can't take it with me, and I might not make it out of this." Because I think everyone always defaults to cops are the way they are because of all the horrible things they see. And obviously that plays a huge part in it.
Absolutely.
But then there's all these other pieces that I think can really weigh on your mind, as you're kind
Well,
of like navigating.
and that's part of it as well. What was the stat that police officers experience, like 100 times more traumatic life experiences or events than the everyday person?
Yeah, it's like depending on the department, it's between 200 and 400 critical incidents in a 25-year career, and the average person in a 70-year life will experience like 4.
Yeah. Yeah.
Some
So it's wow. And when you see that over and over, not all of those critical incidences are death, but not all of those deaths are bad people, right? They're not all the gangbanger who got shot in the shooting, right? A lot of them are just the bad car accidents, the got called to a medical event. So you see that a lot, and that does impact your decision. It's like, oh man, I showed up to, this neighbor's house that we go to all the time, and all of a sudden he went from healthy to dead. It does drive your decision making, whether you're consciously thinking it or not. It definitely drives your decisions on how you're spending your money.
That's a really interesting point about the unconscious too. I mean, I work a lot in that area, and I love doing it, not just because it's fun and there's limitless capacity to a human psyche,
Mhm.
but also because nobody talks about it anymore. They just don't teach this conscious unconscious function in grad school anymore. It's all about behaviorism and what we can measure and quantify and label, which is fine. You can help people make some changes, but they're not super deep usually. I'm more interested in going deep into people's you know abilities and talents that they have yet to discover, but also what lies in there is a lot of negativity and repressed stuff. So when we talk about unconsciously, you don't unconsciously think. So I don't want to misspeak there, but you're unconsciously behaving in a way that is often sets aside future planning. Now, I find this bizarre because as a firstborn in my family, and we were ultra conservative in most ways, not politically necessarily, but like financially and socially and occupationally for sure. My parents were very, very conservative. So I always had an eyeball to the future. I was always thinking about saving before spending. And it was weird to me when I would see people get the boat, and the RV and the cabin and the extra guns, and I'm like, where are you getting your money? But then I would hear some of them talk in ways that you framed it like it's just a shift of overtime. We just pick, or in food service, even it's like, I just pick up a lunch shift and I'll pay it off. It's like,
Yep.
yeah, you're getting tickets to the ball game over the weekend. Like, you're gonna drive to San Francisco and watch the Giants. Man, that's a really expensive trip for, I know what you make because I'm serving tables right alongside you. It's like, I'll just pick up a lunch shift on Saturday and a lunch shift on Sunday and I'll pay for it. That mentality eludes me, but balanced against the unconscious awareness, which again it sounds like a contradiction in terms. If you're aware, you can't be unconscious and vice versa. But the unconscious acknowledgement that you might not be here tomorrow, instant gratification makes sense, right? So of course you're going to want to chase the fun and frivolity of today. And I wonder too how many people in these jobs, whether it be police, we're talking policing here, but also fire and EMS and military, how many of them willfully avoid having children or actively resent them after having children if it's really a two-party decision between husband and wife? Because you can't be mindless about the future and also trying to raise children. It doesn't work, right? So I wonder how much stress, because these are organic thoughts now. I've never actually
Yeah.
considered these angles before. I wonder how much of that goes into the stress of the day to day of somebody who is balancing his or her acknowledgement of the tenuousness of life against the promise of future to spouse, children, retirement, whatever. And we haven't even gotten into the calculations of retirement and the public employees retirement system, and we'll probably touch on that later. But I don't know. What do you guys think about that?
I think having kids and planning to raise kids are two different things.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. Well, there's that old adage too, where I'm not raising children, I'm raising adults. Like, how many people actually consider that?
Yeah, that's an interesting thought. I really haven't thought about that. I know we never
I
wanted
neither. That's why I
kids.
brought it up. I was like, wait a minute, I think we're onto something here.
I do know that two of the, you know, I guess I don't know the stats on this, but really bad kids typically are kids of police officers and kids of clergymen.
Pastors, yep, yep.
Yep. Right. And a lot of it might be bad parenting. We think of, again, going back to Ket Williams and what he talked about with it. He shared his experience. When you're a cop, you just have a cynical view. You're absent a lot, you're scheduled. So part of it's bad parenting by choice. Part of it's bad parenting because you're just not around, or you see your kid as the kids that you're working with or dealing with every day. Yeah, I wouldn't have a good way to fathom, I guess, as if people are actually planning out parenting versus the act that goes into creating a child, which is probably more fun and the risque part of
Usually,
the
yeah.
personality. Yeah, usually, exactly. So yeah,
Practicing to have children.
exactly. But yeah, Mike, what do you think?
Well, yeah, the one thing that like crossed my mind or just stuck with me, and I can't remember exactly who said it, which one of the speakers, because every speaker was so good. But remember, he's like, yeah, like he has this horrible day. He sees all this stuff. He handles it. He comes home. The first thing his wife wants to do is talk about his day. And he sits in a recliner and opens a beer and like tunes out. I mean, that's, yeah, he wasn't exactly saying he was ignoring his kids, but if you're doing that type of behavior, if like that's the norm and that's how you decompress and you don't talk to anybody, you're probably not talking to your kids as well. Right. And, Jake, you're pretty mindful of like, especially when you're like, yeah, man, I really screwed up with Ethan, or you know what I mean? Like, yeah, I shouldn't have done that, and like you can like auto correct in your head, and I'm just wondering like how many police officers can't, just because of the nature of the job and what they go through. I know I'm guilty of it all the time. Like, people ask me about like how my day was or how the convention was, and I was like, "It's good. It was good." Like literally, I was gone for 7 days, and I just literally give them, "It's good," because it's like I don't want to recap it. I'm not in the mood to recap it. I want to talk about something else, or I want to listen to them. You know what I mean?
And you're not looking at death and destruction, right? It's
Nope.
just a lot.
Yeah, it's
One thing
just
that's
how I am. Yeah.
well, so recently, my wife and I, especially from getting back from this, really, she's been so good at this, and I realized how much of an asshole I've been. A lot of it stems from what Kent was saying out there, which I'll share. But she shared with me, she's like, I just want to know everything about your day. Like I want to feel involved and included. So I've had to shift my mindset on that. It's not that sometimes we don't want to share because we've been talking about it all day for 7 days, whatever it is. But part of it is also I find it boring. It's fine. It was the same day as it was yesterday, just with different clients or different speaker, different school. But for my wife, it's new. So I've had to, and I fight with myself on this all the time, of actually opening up and sharing about my day. Uh, so that's been a mindset shift. And I go back to Kent shared. He said there's 5 perspectives of a police officer. They're pessimistic, non-trusting, control freak who fights change and assesses blame. And that was going back to opening up and sharing with my wife. Like I heard him say that over and over. And he said, these are the tools you're given, but it's not who you are. And when I think about those, a lot of times I wasn't opening up. So I wanted to protect her. I didn't think she needed to know anything. I might have a bad spin on it. It just didn't seem important. Whereas now I think of when she asked me that, I'm like, all right, she's asking because she's a friend. She's my wife, but she's a friend. She just wants to know. Like with my friend, we're going to say, hey, Seth, how was your day? Like, I'm probably going to give him more than a fine answer. I'll probably share with him some more details. So that's been a mindset shift for me since August. I'm not perfect with it by any means. I'm still probably sub 50% opening up, but I'm getting better, I think.
So, me too. Mine's been a little bit longer than August, but very recent nonetheless. And one of the things I shared with Kent and Chris Proha too, who will also be on the podcast about January-ish, I think we've scheduled him, is how similar the careers are between psychotherapists and police officers. You might think, well, that's weird, but when you consider that we're also called to be the sin eaters of society, people show up in our office to tell us their deepest, darkest problems, and they trust us with that. And then we're bound by confidentiality never to share it.
Mm-hmm.
Where's it go? Right. Like we're also, by the way, told that, we're supposed to be kind and compassionate and loving and non-judgmental and non-attached. And so we don't get to have gallows humor. So if you try gallows humor around a bunch of therapists, you're going to get some really sideways looks because we're just supposed to be loving at all times, right? Like we're supposed to be non-judgmental and see things from all perspectives. So it's very challenging on the home front when the wife asks, how's your day? And my internal mechanism says, first, protect her from what I've been seeing and experiencing. That I want to shield her from that. But then there's a subliminal undertone there that suggests that maybe she's fragile or something and can't handle it, which I think is inappropriate. I don't necessarily need to make that assumption. But I also don't need to share all the gory details because, again, confidentiality. I don't want to be breaching my patient's confidentiality by telling everything. So how do we balance that when she's authentically asking? I authentically need to do some decompression so that I don't bottle it up and then, kick the dog or whatever, scream at the children. And it becomes very, very hard because, again, you're having to relive it. Now, I happen to think that I was very well trained by my professors back, 15, 17 years ago to leave work at work. And I'm trying to do this with other groups now as I get asked to go speak to places like, nobody thinks about prosecutors or even defense attorneys, prosecutors and the victim services folks. And I mean, they're watching body cam footage now. Dispatchers do the same thing. And it's like, they're intaking all the same stuff and they also have no place to go with it. So I happen to think that I learned non-attachment really well. And so when Heather asks me, how was your day? What did you do? What were some highlights? Whatever. I legitimately can't remember. And so I start from 9 a.m. or 7 a.m. or whatever. And I start going through and go, oh yeah, I forgot about that. Oh, I forgot about that. I forgot. And then I tell her a few things, but it's, I don't know what the benefit is for me. I know what the benefit is for her because it's a proximity thing. It's a vulnerability and an intimacy thing. And that's good and honest. And that's how marriages get stronger. I don't know how I deal with that so well though. It's like, I don't want to relive my day. I haven't even done my log notes yet. And that's a reliving of the day when I do my charting. I don't know. This is a good topic though. And I wish we had more audience participation because I'd like to hear what other people have to say about this in the comments.
Do two birds, one stone. You could do your log notes in front of your wife so she can hear about your day while you're actually documenting it. It's perfect.
I look over my shoulder. Can you believe this stuff? For the listening audience, if you're one of my patients, I don't actually do that.
No, it is interesting. So perfect scenario. We're working through like a insurance claim. Our house was flooded 4.5, 5 months ago now. So we've been working through that. And so there's a back and forth just yesterday that I was included on and she wasn't. But it's not relevant. Like, I don't think she needs to know this yet until we kind of get to the end. But I was talking to her this morning. I'm like, you know what? I guess I'll tell her because while she doesn't need to know, she'll probably rather have too much information than too little. But it was that silly internal fight this morning. Like, you don't need to tell her that. Like, this is insignificant. It's like, yeah, but she probably wants to know. I told her. She said, oh, thanks for letting me know. And that was it. We moved on. It's so dumb to have that fight in my head of trying to protect her from over communication. Here's another email, right? Versus, well, what's the harm in just sharing this?
Yeah, I wonder how much of that too is just masculine, manliness of wanting to, protect and defend. And part of that is protect and defense of the woman we love and her psyche. Like, let me go out and fight the bears and the tigers and the wildebeests, and you stay home and don't worry about it. Right? You come home with blood all over you. She's like, what's going on? It's like, it's not my blood. It's the wildebeest blood. She cares. She's concerned. It's like, well, part of the reason is that I want to be able to go do this to protect you so that we don't have two people who are stressed out. Right. That's not useful.
Yeah. And I found that she's much more reasonable than I am. So usually if I share, it's, what many hands make light loads or
Yeah.
whatever it's
Well,
called. I don't know, right?
perspectives. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah. And she helps, we balance each other out that way where she can talk me off the cliff on why it's not a big deal or vice versa. Or, hey, that we both know now we can both probably problem solve better than one of us on our own. So,
Well, that takes an ego humility. And if you're, a cop, young, thinks he's got the world by the tail, it's going to be really hard to humble oneself to go in and receive that kind of feedback and acknowledge that maybe I don't have all the perspectives.
yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
how,
certainly.
what was that gap? What was it when you said there was a gap?
Mhm.
Like, what did you go through? Because
That's
that's a
fun.
hell of an identity to have as a police officer, and then kind of be like, well, what's next? I think a lot of like active duty military people have that issue when they get out, right? Like, what's next for my
Mhm.
life? Where do I go now? I'm so used to having like routine. This is what I do. You know what I mean? Like, I'm
Yeah.
being told what to do, and that I don't have to really think about it. This is what I have to do every day. Like, how did that hit you?
Yeah, there is certainly an ease to being a police officer when you show up, you open up your laptop, your squad car, squad box, and you just see calls and you go to them, you check them off the box, done, done, done. That there's an ease to that. It's not, there's simplicity to it. It's not easy, but simplicity. But yeah, that shift, I truly believe that anybody who gets into, not everybody, but most people who get into law enforcement have a servant's heart. Like they care, they want to do good. And unfortunately, you don't get that in waves. You get it occasionally. I can think of, a couple of letters that I got throughout the 5 years from citizens who were like, oh my God, thank you so much. Very helpful. And I can think of a lot more one finger waves that I got as a cop, right? So when I got into law enforcement, the reason I got into it, I wasn't getting out of it. So once I left, I actually was big into fitness at the time. I still try to stay active. I I left and I joined the fitness world. I owned a CrossFit gym for a couple of years, but that's where I met my current financial advisor. In the fitness world, it's a servant's mindset, right? I open up a door, people come in, they have a goal. I get to help them accomplish that goal, and then they even go home. Nobody flips me off, and nobody showed up with guns. It was great. But after working with my financial advisor for a few years, I remember it like it happened this morning. We were meeting, we actually share a building now, but it's in a different building. He had two doors in his office. I remember sitting down for a review. We go through a retirement plan, and he's like, hey, you're not on track, but we just need to make a couple of changes. You and Emily and your family are going to be great. You'll be okay. Like, awesome. Love it. Thanks, Dave. Get up, turn around, walk out. Walk through the first door, get out the second door, and I stop, and it's like that proverbial weight off your shoulders, like the literally shoulders just, and it hit me. I'm like, holy shit! Like this is what I got into law enforcement. I wanted to meet somebody. They have a problem. They want help. I solve the problem, and they're in a better spot because of me. So ego, right? Like I want to be the change agent for their life. I want them to be able to turn around. They don't have to tell me like, oh my God, he's the best ever. But I do want them to be able to turn around and say, hey, our life is different because of my interaction with that person. And I literally turned back around. I walked in and said, hey, Dave, I want to do what you're doing. Can I do this? So that was the fast forward between getting out of law enforcement, I think it was 2014, to starting this in 2019. And it's truly similar. The career here, we get to show up, help people, and leave them better than we found.
I'm going to have to come back and listen to this again. I almost never listen to our own content because I don't know. I know what I have to say and I'd rather spend my time listening to other people who are smarter than I am. But what you're saying is really moving some stuff and shifting it in me. And I gotta go back and explore it. One of the things that just popped up though is the idea of consent. So in the police world, people aren't necessarily consenting to your arrival or your intrusion, right? And I've wrestled with this over time with some of the boards and coalitions and committees and, health and wellness hubs or whatever that I've sat on, where there's a bunch of smart people sitting around a table with our advanced degrees looking at a community. doesn't matter what kind, doesn't matter the demographic. And we go, you know what they need? They need X. And we can offer X. And it's like, anybody ever bother to ask them if they're requesting X, or are we just going to like shove it on them, in some overly virtuous, intrusive way? Now in therapy land, which is the worst theme park in existence, as it turns out, people presumably, clear their throat and raise their hand and sign on the dotted line and consent to the care. But my good friend and mentor, Christian Conti, take a drink. He says people don't want your advice, they want your approval. And I wonder how much of that actually plays out in your realm now as a financial planner, wealth advisor. I know they're not interchangeable terms, but people are coming to you and they say, I need your help and assistance in guiding me toward a comfortable retirement. How often do you encounter the issue of consent, but not really? Like, do you find yourself arm wrestling people? Like, I
All
know
the
it's
time.
way different than police work.
Yeah, all the time. We're all stuck in our ways. And so this is a crazy parallel between law enforcement. There's a very good parallel between law enforcement and the work that I do. And I always use it. I know it's a drastic analogy, but it's there. Domestic abuse, right? You show up to somebody, a victim of domestic abuse, you show up to their house. And in Wisconsin, there's essentially a must arrest statute, right? Like we show up, if there's any sign of it, somebody's going. Somebody's got to get out of here for the night. They're usually going to jail. And then you're offering the victim services, whether it's a place to stay, a way out, whatever it is, some transition away from this relationship. But typically they don't leave. A lot of times they don't. And a lot of it's rooted in the fact that they know exactly what they have. They know 4 or 5 days a week life is good. They know 2 to 3 days a week it's not good. But they do know that at least they have a roof, they have food, and they're okay, not great. And to make a change, to take something, it's scary. They don't know what that could be. It could be worse. In finance, it's no different. I get introduced to people through clients all the time, and they're happy with where they are. Not too many people show up saying, oh my God, I absolutely need your help because of X, Y, Z. Most people feel good about where they are. They have advisors and they just feel good. So you walk them through that full process and you get to the end and you know that there's a solution for them that can make it better, but we're stuck in our ways. And we say, you know what? Thanks, but no thanks. So I don't know, very similar, but this is much better. I'd much rather be here dealing with these problems than my former ones.
Right. Because there's the presumption of consent involved, right? And then you do end up getting more high fives and thumbs ups than you do, shooting the rod through the windshield at you. Don't go into psychotherapy because we actually, if you look at Zephyr Wellness's rating, I think we might be right at 3.0 stars right now on Google. But, it's like when you're holding boundaries with people, it's hard too. And then, people don't want to break their own confidentiality by giving you a 5-star rating, even though they've successfully completed care, because we still have a stigma around mental health. So yeah, it's tough. I understand that.
Yeah, I think it's way harder for people to leave something complimentary than when they're driven by anger or the fact that they may think you've disappointed them in some sort of way. It's just so common. Like I see it all the time. You look at like there's plenty of restaurants I like out here and I look at the bad reviews and I'm like, what like, how did that happen? Like, what did you do to this person? Because I've been here 100 times and it's been great and the food's great and the service is great, but it's those ones that stick out, negative.
Jake, to your point from earlier, it's the louder ones. Those are the
right.
ones that are
the
louder.
5%. They seem overrepresented.
I actually left a Google review the other day for probably the first time in like 20 years. It's probably the second one I ever left. It was a positive review. I try not to do the negative reviews online, but I felt pretty good about that.
I actually have to do a few now that you're reminding me of this. We had a great roof installed recently. We had a great floor redone. So I need to get on those guys.
Why do you think that's it's so much easier to tell your friends how great that service was than to actually get on and leave a review?
For me, I try not to do anything too much online. Like I don't usually go and post reviews. I don't want people to have to click on me and find, like, I don't know. That's why I don't do much of anything online. However, with this water issue that we had in our house, our house is a fucking indoor water park, guys. Like it looked like Home Alone. You know how like the wet bandits put water, like that's what it looked like in our house. Anyways, water issue.
Okay, that's the worst theme park in America. I thought Therapy Land was, but it turns out it's the Hendricks household.
Yeah. But no, the water restoration people just knocked it out of the park. So it was to a point where it's like, I can't not give them a review. They asked like, hey, if you feel good about it, leave a review, good or bad. But to your point, Mike, I was looking at some of the reviews and there were plenty of terrible reviews. And I'm like, not my experience, not these guys, not the ones who came and helped me. So
neurologically speaking, from an emotional functioning standpoint, because that's what I do, I can tell you that anger is our chief motivator. Most of our emotions motivate. They either motivate to take action or whatever, to keep doing what you're doing. If you're happy, the motivation is to not change. But anger's motivation is usually to make change. So I think oftentimes that's how we end up with activism. You got people, grabbing their signs on sticks and going down to the courthouse and protesting or whatever. And it gives the brain something to feel when there's disappointment. Anger often papers over the sadness of whatever the failed expectation is that created the disappointment. But in order to deal with it, the disappointment adequately, you have to sit in it and go, this sucks. I'm sad. Anger is a proxy. So anger will motivate to go make change sometimes. And sometimes that change just simply can't be made. But in leaving a nasty review, you're telling your own brain, I'm quote unquote doing something, just like going down and picketing at the courthouse is quote unquote doing something. It's like you're not doing anything, but you're giving your brain something to feel as a stand-in for the actual feeling. The disappointment usually is what's happening, or the fear. Sometimes it's fear motivated. Like, I don't want this bad burger joint to poison anybody else with undercooked meat. So I'm afraid that they're going to do it. So I'm motivated to go leave a nasty review. Whereas happiness, if you're satisfied with what you got, where's the motivation to go do something? There isn't any. It's just, I'm just going to go back and give them more business later. So that's at least the neurological reason from my perspective as to why people leave nasty reviews as opposed to good ones.
Yeah, I'm looking at the chat real quick. We had Patriot from Warsaw. That's a great point about the gun community. We say it all the time. I want to share a story though of hope. Like, I was just down in Tempe at Arizona State University. I spoke there on Tuesday at a symposium, and then went right into the research conference. And I'm not gonna put this person's business out there, but something tragic had happened to her, and she comes from the research world. And the symposium on Tuesday, one of the themes was what are researchers getting right and what are they getting wrong, and what is the gun industry getting right and wrong, right? But I had a private conversation with this person, and she basically said, she's like, I really want to bring more gun people into the fold, because after my tragedy, she's like, I felt like the gun people were the nicest. Like, the gun people were the ones that were really concerned about me. She doesn't know too many gun people, but out of the probably 8 or 9 of us that she knows on a, first name basis, she was saying that she was really impressed with the compassion that gun people have in tragedy, because she doesn't see it, right? Because her side's, hey, something tragic happened and everyone's like, we got to get rid of the guns and these gun people, and they don't care, and this and this and that. So there is a lot of hope out there. I mean, I think it's just, I think it's easy for us to be divisive sometimes, because we always feel like our rights are under attack or we're misunderstood. But it's kind of like, my point is, that's why we got to keep branching out and go into places that may be a little uncomfortable for us to actually step into. It's not uncomfortable for me. I'm so used to it at this point. You know that, Jake. Like, I literally just tiptoe through there and I'm like, what's up? But I mean, that's why we got to do it, because there's this narrative that's always created about gun people and the gun community. And some of it may seem like it's well deserved, because optically, if you look at the way some people like spit fire anger, then you can come to that conclusion. But I just kind of wanted to share that with you. Like, we got to do our best not to be divisive. And sometimes you have to like understand, like, I'm going to listen to a bunch of stuff that I don't necessarily want to hear, like one other quick anecdote. There was a lady down there who was from the research side who who lost a child in Sandy Hook, elementary, and it's like once you like how do you there's nothing you can when someone says like I lost my child in the Newtown massacre, like there's really nothing we as the gun community can say at that moment that's going to be able to put all of our minds at peace, right? It's kind of a zero sum game. And I think we always have to keep that in mind that many times we're divisive against a lot of people that just don't want to see people die.
That's one of my favorite quotes from you is when you say, you don't hate guns, you hate death. Like that's so profound. This is one of the sensitive topics, quote unquote, that we're told to deal with as therapists. Death, sexual orientation, sexual activity, um, suicidal ideation. There's things that you don't talk about in public discourse at the barbecues and the cocktail parties. One of those is finances. And I'm curious, Seth, as the guy, because Mike is the guy and I am the guy who has no problem trotting into impolite topics, shall we call them. How do you manage that in your private life, as you're out in public or whatever with people, to church or whatever, and they want to like talk about finances and you're like, I have no problem talking about finances. But to them, it's like they 2 steps forward, 1 step back. Like, is it okay?
Yeah. Well, first I share with Jake, I'm sure you do with your clients to an extent of like, hey, confidentiality is the same in our world, right? Like, so if I see a client out, I always tell them, we'll never talk about finances unless you bring it up. But I'm open, and I share with people like finances are numbers. Finances are that's all it is. And in our world, in the U.S., we are terrible at teaching finances. So if your numbers are worse than your neighbor's numbers, that's okay. They're better than somebody else's numbers. They're just numbers. The important thing is to have the conversation so we can make those numbers be better for you. If we continue to not talk about the numbers, they won't get better. Just like everything else. If you don't like your fitness level, not addressing your fitness level isn't going to make your fitness level go up. If you don't like your mental health, if you feel like, and I had this with my therapist, conversation with my therapist 2 years ago, like, what brings you in? As a new therapist, was like, well, I am seeing myself not having really great responses to my kids. I get upset pretty easily, and I don't want that to happen anymore. And we worked on it for a year, and they got better. But it took a lot to get there. So I don't know. I don't know if that's a long-winded answer, but to me, I just see it as numbers. We shouldn't be
No, it's
ashamed
good.
of it.
Yeah,
We're
you
never
remove the
taught how to deal with
emotion
it.
and the judgmentalism and the suspicion. You just say it is. It's not it is great or it is terrible. It is. What do you want to do about it?
One thing that's been on my mind, going back to like subconscious, in law enforcement and how we act, but Mike, when you're talking now about being around gun owners and the person sharing, like all the gun owners I know are pretty empathetic. It truly is. We're a product of the people we hang around the most, right? Whether we know it or not, we're absorbing and taking that in. So in law enforcement, you're hanging around most of the time at work, like-minded folks, when you're at the PD, but when you're out in the public, you're dealing with people who are always having problems. So that's an issue. So you're dealing with people who are always in crisis mode. But also, because we get into our bubbles, if I don't want to talk about guns or I hate guns, I'm usually probably not at a gun range and find myself in the echo chamber of people who hate guns. I'm more liberal now than conservative, voted both Democrat and Republican and libertarian for that matter in my life. And I still struggle when I see things that I don't agree with. I struggle not to just X out of that article. It's like, man, I have to challenge myself to try to read it and get through it, even if I disagree with it. Uh, I fight that every day when I'm every week when I'm trying to read through some news articles that I disagree with. But I think that's the important part. And looking at the chat, which I didn't know was there until you mentioned it. The Patriot from Warsaw, he's talking about that of like, where'd it go? I regret a lot of things, wish to change and improve myself. It's like, as long as you call that out, now how do we surround ourselves with people who we agree with and disagree with, but we can be open-minded to have a conversation, which as a 22-year-old cop out of college, I was fixed. I was fixed mindset. This is what I'm going to do. and I'm very fixed in some things today, but I'm very open-minded in a lot of things. That's kind of where I see it today.
Yeah, you got to keep that open minded. Sometimes it's really, really tough to do. I try to always validate, like the last, I'm thinking about the conference, right? Because I just came
Mhm.
off that conference and I was there from basically, Monday to Friday. It's like people will bring up things like waiting periods on a firearm, right? And they'll just be like, there should be mandatory waiting periods for all firearm owners. And I always tell them stories of when time and space, because if we all agree that time and space can stop someone from completing suicide, then obviously a waiting period is a perfect example of that. But, so usually I give them that first, right? And I tell them like personal stories of like when I was a traveling salesman and I walked into a store one time and I said, I'm from Bursa, which was the factory I was representing. And I remember like the kid behind the counter like went ghost white. And I was like, something wrong? And he was just like, no, it's just weird that you walked in here because yesterday a lady spent 3 hours with me in the gun shop, like price comparing, feature, comparing. And basically in the end, she bought a Bursa, went home and took her own life with it. And it freaked the kid out. You know what I mean? So like I always tell that story to say like if we all agree that time and space, yes, like that lady probably could have used that waiting period, but then I always try to say how many people buy a gun every day and that doesn't happen, right? It
Mhm.
far outweighs, so sometimes you have to accept that there's a certain amount and nobody wants to hear that, right? Because once again, Jake, like we say, people just don't like death, but I have to you got to find a way to kind of talk to them about it where you're kind of validating what they're saying but talking about how complex it is, and then you have to kind of be able to listen to stuff that knee jerk reaction, you almost want to be like, absolutely not. You know what I mean? And I think that's kind of where we missed it, right? Is like the full blown explanation of some of the whys. Like, I think we have trouble. If I had one critique of the gun community, would be having the patience and staying calm in the argument, just because they don't know what they don't know. I mean, the researchers, the people in behavioral health, they don't know what they don't know. Like, there are plenty of times during last week where I had to basically educate them on a process, even when it came to purchasing a gun or what gun shops can and cannot do, or how hard it is to maybe stop straw purchases. There's all kinds of things that I think we got to be cognizant of, but it is tough. It is not easy to do.
But it doesn't sell. It doesn't generate donations to the campaign, whether the campaign be for lawsuit funding or political office or just another advertisement to sell more products. Reason and balance and humility don't sell. They just don't. And it's for all the reasons we talked about earlier with the neurological functioning of anger and fear and sadness and shame. Neutrality doesn't it doesn't fill the coffers, right? And so when you put your motivation into money generation or power and control over the mission of understanding and bridging gaps, you're just not going to get there. So that's what makes us unique, I think, in being able to have conversations like this, and listen actively to all sides and hear that all sides have merit, because they do, because human beings all have merit. Um, you could flip that story around that you just told and say, there's probably a story out there where somebody needed a firearm rapidly because somebody just got released from prison and is coming to abuse them, and it's the only defense they have. I don't know. So, Seth's the
You're right.
guest. We should probably ask him
No,
to
no,
weigh in
this
here.
is no, this is this is great. I am curious on, or Mike, what you do well based on our conversations, and is you are open to accepting criticisms and having conversation. And where I think people, and Jake, you know this more than I do, but we're like a herd community, right? We would like to have our pods and defend them ferociously. And we need to also be willing to out the bad ones of our herd. And I think that makes us stronger and more approachable, not necessarily more likable. I don't think that's the goal, but I think the goal is to be more approachable, have the conversations. And in law enforcement, I love your shirt today, Mike. What is it? What is that? Most effective devil in America, right? Yeah, media. I love, but it's true, right? Like, what do you see on CNN when it comes to law enforcement? Do you see anything good? Most of the time, it's no,
Yeah.
right? Um, and the reality is, most cops are. If you were to ask most police officers in America, say, "Hey, tell me your ideal day." I roll into work, I hit briefing, we grab a cup of coffee, we get in the squad car, do our squad check, make sure our gear's good, we roll around for 8 hours, and then we go home. Like, don't have to do any paperwork. Community was safe. We're good to go. I don't think there's going to be anybody who says, man, I hope today's the day that we get into some high profile shit and my name's plastered all over the news, right? Like, most cops aren't that way. Now, there are some cops who are bad cops. I actually worked with one, kind of going back to the financial question. He was one that was bad with money. He was always working overtime, and he ended up getting arrested by the feds. He went to a different department, got arrested by the feds, served some time. Anyways, there are bad cops, right? Like, that's just the way it is. But it's important that when that gets brought up, I can't stand behind him like, oh yeah, like he's not wrong. Everything he did was right. It's like, no, that's a bad thing that this human being did in a police officer's uniform. But that doesn't paint the 90% of a department who are actually good people doing this work. And I see that in the gun community as well, or any community. Like, we have to be willing to say, like, nope, that's a bad person who was a gun owner. That's a bad person who served at the restaurant, going back to your Yelp reviews or whatever it was, right? Like, not all restaurants are bad. This server at that restaurant sucked. He's terrible.
Well, you may find it hard to believe, but there are people out there who don't like Walk the Talk America because of what Mike just said, because he will consider the other side, because he will grant an audience. There's just people out there who are in the gun community and think that that you have to pass their purity test. And it's their purity test, not anybody else's purity test. So there's that.
Yeah,
I'm curious.
Understood though why people think, like Jake, when we did the Moms Demand Action event, which to this day I will look every gun person in the face and be like, if you thought that was wrong, you're an idiot, and I don't want you in the gun industry. Like, because what we learned and how we learned how they move and kind of what they do behind the scenes, that was more valuable than anything. But not one person invited us on a show to talk about that. If you notice that, right? We talked about it.
Yep.
And then people were like, wow, that's amazing. Seth, back to your point about like CNN with police officers, like my wife's from Slovakia, and like, it's crazy how I watch it work in real time. Like, they'll show a cop doing something so horrible or silly or on Instagram, and she will literally be like, what is wrong with the police in America? like I always ask, like, what, you don't have bad cops in Slovakia? And she's like, no, they can't do what you guys do here. Like, they're not allowed to do. And it's like, I have no clue if she's telling the truth or not. Like, I don't know if maybe like the media just buries. Something tells me Slovakian cops aren't necessarily all on the up and up.
Yeah, I also, the hard part with cops though is the mistakes that we make or they make are more grave, right? Like, if I were to be, I worked in the service industry my entire life, Jake, so I can fully, like, if I fuck up an order, like, you got the wrong food, as long as you're not allergic to it, you probably didn't die. Like, that sucks, right? Cops, you make a bad mistake, it's life changing. It can't be, but most of them aren't. Ask somebody when they want to dog on the video I saw of the cop doing a bad thing or the wrong thing. It's like, hey, no problem. You're right. What you showed me, that was wrong. I'm going to follow you around with a camera now for the next 40 hours this week. And you're going to tell me that in that 40 hours, there's not going to be a 30-second clip of you acting a complete fool. You blow up at your kids. You get pissed at your spouse. You run a red light. You whatever, right? Like, no. And now that 40 hours isn't your regular life of sitting in an office. It's you out trying to solve other people's problems, Jake, to your point, who don't want you there, right? So it doesn't give excuse to the really bad cops who have done really bad things. And to the point of everybody should have sat at a part of that symposium. When you realize what cops actually go through on a day-to-day basis, there are so many more good people doing great police work in our communities than there are bad cops out there.
Yeah, 100%.
Well,
So
that's probably a good place to end, unless Mike, you got something else there.
no,
I was just
I
noticing
want to
time.
kind of just I want to bring it back just to the financial real fast. Like,
Hmm.
how did you how did you come to the conclusion that there was this missing piece, this hole, and that you wanted to kind of dive in? Now, and I got to ask, like, are you predominantly law enforcement, like, or
Uh, Not predominantly law enforcement, but it is a niche. It's an underserved part of the financial services industry. In the financial services industry, there's a race to the millionaires. Like, hey, how do I get in front of the most millionaires? That's how I build my business the fastest. Which I get it. I have some millionaire clients. Most of them are like they're actually really good people. Like I don't have the bougie snooty ones, right? Um,
Some of my best friends are millionaires.
yeah, right.
They're actually really nice people.
Yeah, but what's underserved are just the blue collar folks who make $100,000 to $200,000 a year just trying to get by. Kids in law enforcement specifically, they have a pension, so there's not a lot of planning that can always be done with them that drives revenue for an advisor. So I truly believe that they're underserved for several reasons, that being one of them. But also, it's a community I love to stay involved in. I love connecting with new cops. I love connecting with my current clients who are cops. It's fun to feel that brotherhood, even though I never worked with them. Some of them I've never met in person because I'm licensed in, I don't know, 30 states or something like that. So we worked with a few, but we have a same lingo. If you played football and you're talking to somebody who's played football, like you can talk about football and feel that connection. So underserved community, fun to connect with, fun to just be part of the world. But also it's important for me that I'm helping them steer down the better path, and now with every cop I've talked to since leaving that mental health symposium, I've shared with them like, hey, this is coming up next year. You need to put it on your calendar. It's a must go to event to make sure that you can stay healthy and be a good cop for the rest of your life.
and how many do you know? Are there more people like you, or are you like the only one that you've ever met? Have you ever met another financial planner that literally was like, I was a cop?
No. I know there are. I know there are. I
There
just don't.
has to be. I'm just wondering if you've met them.
No, I haven't.
Okay.
We did have another police officer join years ago, and he's exited the business. It's a tough business to make it in, just as far as building the business goes. So, but no, I don't know any that are still in the business.
Like therapist gun owners.
My therapist gun owners, the non-gun gun guy.
Yeah. Mike, ask Seth what you normally ask everyone.
All right. How do you tend to your mental health these days, Seth?
Well, up until the last 2 weeks, I've worked out a lot. I actually did an ultra marathon last month, so that was fun. Did 50 miles, very slow though. So I try to work out consistently. I have a therapist. I haven't seen her for a while with the house being flooded. I know it's a bad excuse, but just life has been crazy. Uh, that's 10, and then trying to remind myself of everything that I learned at the mental health symposium consistently with my wife and trying to be more open with her. Those would probably be the 3 ways that I work on it.
Because the last few weeks, is that because you're recovering from the marathon or because the house flooding? Or
No, we moved back in, and it's like moving into a house for the first time. So everything's packed up and boxed away.
uh,
I haven't had time to do anything that hasn't been work or house related.
my ears hear 50 miles of running. I'm just assuming it takes you 6 to 8 weeks to recover. But I'm old and
No,
fragile too.
yeah, I run slow, so recovery on that's pretty quick.
Well, thanks for joining us, Seth. I appreciate you. How can people reach you if they want to? Are you on social medias? Do you want to be reached?
Yeah, just look for me on LinkedIn, Seth Hendricks. I run my firm, hang my brokerage through Northwestern Mutual, so you'll find me on there. Yeah, that's probably the best way to connect with me professionally. Shoot me an
Awesome.
email, I suppose, if you want, seth.j.hendricks@nm.com. And Hendricks, you can see it there on the screen, ICKS.
Awesome. Well, we appreciate you and we appreciate your time. I'm glad we got to meet you in Vegas. And it sounds like that was super impactful. I know it was for me, and I'm excited for this upcoming year. Maybe we'll see each other again. And until then, we wish you all great mental wellness on behalf of the Walk the Talk America family. Happy Thanksgiving.
Thanks, guys. It's
Happy
great to be on.
Thanksgiving. Thank you.